To be well educated. That's the overall topic for this program. Stan now considers all things. But what is it really important to be informed about? My younger daughter Margaret and I took a trip back east this summer. She's been looking hard at various schools, and we headed back and we saw Harvard and Amherst, big name colleges. We took a tour of Amherst. We sat in their auditorium. We listened to their "Why you should come here" speech. What they mentioned in that auditorium was, at Amherst, we here are enlightened. We have no breadth requirements, no distribution requirements. All you got to do basically is take 32 courses and do a major, and you've got your bachelor's degree. That's all it takes. No breadth requirements. Students are not required to take courses in English and history and science and philosophy and art and physical education. They said that, well, we would have our counselors urge the students to take some breadth requirements, to take some courses other than in their particular little field of interest, but we won't require it. We are enlightened. They also told me that a bachelor's degree there, the 4 years, would run me as parent a little over $100,000 for everything. $100,000. Well, we also get a student-faculty ratio of 10 to 1, so there'd be lots of opportunity for those little intimate discussion groups. It seems to me, you pay that kind of money, and you have that many professors running around on campus, that they should be able to figure out what should be the heritage of every well-educated liberal arts student. But they don't. They can't figure it out. I'm not as well paid as those professors back east at Amherst, but I do know that as part of the heritage of every liberal arts college student, they should take a course in literature, world literature, to read the greats. We're not talking about job training here. We're not talking about this being medical school or this being a place where you study engineering so you can get a job. We're talking about being a well-educated individual. And world literature should be a part of that. In addition, I think there should be a course in writing the English language, learning to use punctuation, learning some grammar, topic sentences, learning of style, precision of expression. Every well-educated liberal arts student should know those things. I think that every well-educated student should know some history. Imagine getting a bachelor's degree from Amherst or wherever else and never having heard of the Great War. I think that every well-educated student in college should take some science. Not so much that you can slice open frogs and mice without tossing your cookies. It's that you would know enough that you wouldn't be hoodwinked by every politician that comes creeping along wearing his little white smock and pretends to play science. You know, all those scares that we had about acid rain and about global warming about Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, about landfills being filled up. Those predicted horrors didn't happen. Instead of those scares, we got other horrors. Each time those things were pushed on the public, we got a more powerful government to rule over us. We got more bureaucracies and more regulations. Why study history? Why memorize all of those dates and times and places? Well, if history is taught that way, I agree. When history is taught like a cookbook, bop, 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 do this, do that, do the next thing, like arithmetic is taught in many government elementary schools. If it's taught that way, it is deadly and bad. It's confused. It's chaotic. It smells. History taught that way is as exciting as a plate of calamari spaghetti with yam sauce. Why should anything that happened in the last 25 centuries be of importance to a well-educated person? I believe the answer is that history has lessons. Now, doesn't that sound antiquated? But we can learn something about today and even a little bit about what's coming in the future if we look at history. I want to give one example. Looking at history, as I'm currently reading a book called The Ominous Parallels by Leonard Peikoff. And he's describing Germany earlier in this century up through the rise of Hitler. And he asks the question, does it have any relevance to us, to our country, America, today? He describes that time in Germany in terms of all the different realms of experience. In the economic realm, for example, the Republic was a mixed economy, an element of economic liberty, and there was a growing government controls over every aspect of the country's productive life. Peikoff talks about the political realm, the Weimar Constitution. It promised the protection of man's fundamental rights. But unlimited government power was granted by the federal government over public health, over labor laws, banking, industry, theater, cinema. There were over 20 different areas. The federal government had unlimited power over the freedom of movement or the education of children. But what I liked best of all was that Article 114 of the Weimar Constitution. It is duplicity in writing. It read in part, "No personal freedom is inviolable. No restraint," or that sounds wonderful. Personal freedom, rather. It said personal freedom is inviolable. Then it went on to contradict it and say, "No restraint or deprivation of personal liberty by the public power is admissible unless authorized by law." Crazies! In art, the open break with beauty, with intelligibility. Its art was decadent, formless. In the streets, there was blood and looting. Well, are there any parallels between that time in Germany, before the rise of Hitler, and now? You like my shirt? It's a yacht. I wish everybody had a yacht that wanted one. There's our little fellow. There's what economics is all about. He's got wants and desires and needs, and he's got in his little hands 6 cents. I've almost told you half of what there is to know about economics already. The whole idea is scarcity. If diamonds were as plentiful as glass or yachts were as plentiful as leaves that float on the water, then they wouldn't be worth very much. What's a dollar worth? We can run them through our hands. But what are they worth? When I was a kid, I lived in San Francisco, and there was the San Francisco Mint there. And it was by federal law that I could take my dollar bills and $5 bills and $10 bills down to the federal offices, and they would exchange them for silver powder. Those dollar bills could be exchanged for a fixed rate, a fixed amount of silver per dollar. That isn't the case anymore. The dollar has been cut free from any government support. It's ink printed on paper. What it's worth is what someone else will give you for it. If I offer a dollar bill to somebody in exchange for a taco, they might say yes and give me the taco. Since 1967, the dollar has lost 80% of its purchasing power. 67 isn't that long ago. Not to lose 80% of its purchasing power. That statistic I've known for a long time, but it's most recently when I was going through some of my old memorabilia that I found the covers to a couple old math textbooks that I had taken when I was at Cal, Berkeley, in the mid-60s. Textbooks nowadays in mathematics, $40 to $60. That you don't blink an eye if you see those kinds of prices. But these covers, I have the books themselves. I don't know whether you can see the actual amount of the sticker for these new textbooks. My lectures in projective geometry, which I took as a junior, cost $6.50 new, mid-60s. Then I came across finite dimensional vector spaces. And that I took as a junior, I believe, at Cal in the mid-60s. It's $5 new. Maybe dollars aren't as scarce as they used to be. Wonder who's printing them. Using the English language, you know, your use of it changes as you grow up. It changes as you become more well educated. Back in Tom Sawyer's days, oh, he didn't know no better, they would say. Or, he liked it himself. Or, it don't make no never mind. There is a mark of the well-educated person in the way that he or she uses the language either in written or in spoken form. I'm listening to the radio as I buzz down Highway 395, and one of the announcers tells me that traffic ahead is slowing up, 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 down. Ah, it is such a pleasure to go to grocery stores. I saw a sign in the grocery store that said kiwi fruit, 0.25 cents. That's these guys that really haven't had it together, and they love to put the little decimal point there. That's a quarter of a penny. Think of it this way. Which is larger, 1 or 0.25, which is a quarter of 1? 1 is larger. Then 1 cent is larger than 0.25 cents, which is a quarter of a cent. They're selling them for a penny. Now, what the confusion came from, 25 cents, which is what they really meant, could be written as $0.25. Or it could be written as 25 cents. But to combine the two and say 0.25 cents reminds me of the person who really was new to the language, and he saw the words, "it's not." You like that contraction? A little later on he was reading, "it isn't," and he liked that contraction. So why not? Let's put them together. It'sn't. Don't work. It doesn't work. Life gives us data. We look at people. You're short and tall, skinny and fat, weak and muscular. We feel the air temperature. We learn how much people make in different occupations. It is data to which we listen to in life. And how much of life is listening and then doing. And those are the two parts of statistics. Describing the data, summarizing it, and then predicting from it. We get up in the morning, we feel the air, and then we predict the weather. So much of life is like that. Statistics. Describe and summarize the data and then predict. So I received this letter, which I read here, from a dear friend. "Dear Stan, the house is so cold and damp, I should build a fire, but may not, even though my fingers aren't working right. I just ordered 3 more cords of wood to go with what I already have stacked in the garage and shed." This letter from my friend is dated the 31st of August. She lives in New Hampshire. Her data that she gathers is different than the data that we gather here in the western part of Nevada. I look in the paper the same day she gave me that letter, or I received that letter, and there is the sun's. Statistics. We gather and describe the data, and then we predict. Stan now considers all things, this program, considers what it means to be well-educated. And what of the American educational system? From kindergarten through college, the bloated, inefficient, lazy government system that we have reflects in part the American society that it's embedded in. In the early 1970s, we Americans were the largest exporter in the world. We worked, we manufactured, and we priced it right. Our shirt sleeves were rolled up.
In 1987, in contrast to the 1970s, who was the biggest exporter in the world? 1987, it wasn't us. And we have sort of have put on our blinders. We don't want to see. We don't want to know. It was like in school when we turned in our 3-page paper. We didn't want to know about the fellow who was turning in an 18-page paper. You don't think that we're wearing blinders? Okay. Who was the biggest exporter in the world in 1987? It wasn't us. Make your guess. It wasn't Japan. It happened to be Germany, the loser of the 2 world wars in this century. We've imported so much and produced so little that America is now the biggest debtor in world history. The attitude is, what, me work? Oh, work hard? So the average Taiwanese first grader does homework over an hour a night. Our average first grader spends 12 minutes and then heads off to television. You want your children to receive a top-notch education? One of the least likely spots to receive it is in our government-operated schools. When the teachers' union, the biggest union I believe in this country today, pushes for higher salaries, is that so that our educational system will be any better? Then tell me why the teachers' union shuns any effort to get rid of our poor teachers. That would have an influence on our educational system. When the teachers' union pushes for smaller class sizes, is that really for the sake of better education? Well, the scientific studies that have been done about class size show that there is no real clear-cut advantage for a smaller class size. The real advantage for smaller class sizes is that the teachers don't have to work as hard. The government schools, a bloated, inefficient, lazy system. We get much less than what we are paid, that we are forced to pay for.